Business Growth Talks podcast is created and hosted by Mark Hayward. In this show, we talk about how to grow a business in the growth stage. The growth stage is often marked by rapid developments, increased revenue, and an escalating customer base. In each episode, we talk to entrepreneurs and business owners who have grown businesses, and we cover topics like scaling processes, market expansion, financial management, human resource and talent development, and customer retention. If you are looking for actionable advice, tips, and techniques on how to grow, run and build your business, this is the podcast for you.
For joining me today and being with me on this show. One thing that is really important I want to share with you is this show is growing really well, and I'm so proud of it, and I'm so pleased that you're enjoying this content. But if you could please hit the follow and subscribe to this channel, it will really help the channel on its being able to grow and the people that we can have on this show. So please do consider, if you have a moment, please can you hit the subscribe button and the follow button, and I would really appreciate it. Today we have Steve Preda, who is an accomplished business coach, author, and that specializes in guiding entrepreneurs and leadership teams towards sustainable growth and profitability. With over 25 years worth of experience, Steve has worked with hundreds of businesses, developing proven frameworks for success through his flagship programs, Summit OS and Strategy OS. His journey began in Hungary, where he founded and sold an investment banking firm before moving to the US and becoming a trusted advisor and EOS implementer. Now based in Richmond, Virginia, he is an enthusiastic jazz and tennis fan and dedicates his career to helping growth-minded entrepreneurs elevate their businesses through a strategic yet customizable approach. Hello, Steve. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm very good, and especially after this introduction, which was expertly put together, I'm pumped.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steve. We're going to be talking about how you've grown your business and how you help your clients grow their businesses. So that's going to be the main focus of the show, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you about that. As I ask all of my guests, the first question I ask is, what does a business mindset mean to you?
The business mindset means it's a mindset to build a business rather than a mindset to drift with a business. And I make this distinction because as a business coach, I try to avoid working with people who don't have the right mindset. So what is the right mindset? It's all about growing a business. I believe that it's not a new idea that anything that is not growing is dying. So for a business to be successful, it has to be growing. If it's not growing, it's not going to be able to attract the right people that can actually make it a success. It's not going to be able to gain market share. It's not going to be evolving and developing products. So growth is the primary criteria, and that requires a growth mindset. If someone is just they're focusing on, we want to make money, we want to take care of my family, but they're not thinking about, where am I planning to take this business? What is my ultimate objective? Then it's that they are not in the right mindset to grow this business.
Yeah. And we'll talk about your clients and how you help them and how you service them. It will be a key point of this podcast. So we will talk about that. So thank you for clarifying that. Next question. Tell me one thing about your upbringing which reflects on who you are today.
Okay, that's very interesting. My parents are professionals, they're doctors, and I grew up with the expectation that I will also be a professional. Actually, my parents told me that they don't care about what I choose as my occupation for my life, but I just would have to set myself the goal to be one of the best in whatever I do. And that was my mindset. I didn't want to become a doctor because I saw my parents taking calls all hours of the evening and essentially never be off. And I didn't want this kind of life for myself. So I didn't do that. I went into a different direction. Now, I think in terms of upbringing, that's the most important. Why I chose developing business systems as an occupation, I reflected on it recently, and I think it was a result of a coping mechanism. So I was not good at school with rote learning stuff, and in Eastern Europe, where I come from, that was the thing that we had to memorize things, and I was not good at without having some kind of a framework to hang the information on. So I very early on I was developing skills to take notes in certain ways, in a graphical way, so that I could remember things. And I always had to tie things back to causes, cause and effect, and so that I understood the logic, how things build up, so that I could remember it, I could recall it. And I think that eventually that coping mechanism that I built for myself evolved into building business system, which is really systematic ways of growing businesses.
Are you dyslexic?
No, I'm not. I'm a fairly
No?
fast
Okay.
reader. So that's not about dyslexia. It's about, I don't know, maybe it's ADHD. I don't know what it is, but I couldn't remember anything that I was not interested in. And there was a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that I had to learn, and I just didn't have the motivation to learn it. And when I turned it into a game by creating this mental structure, it became more interesting and I could learn it. So I guess something like that.
Yeah, I only ask because that sort of organization of your mind and organizing the work and understanding it the way that you needed to understand it to be able to
Mm.
recall it is actually a little bit dyslexic. That's what my daughter struggles with sometimes and she has to learn things in her own specific
Yes,
way, not necessarily the way the teacher is teaching her. That's why
it's
I asked,
interesting.
but that's
Yeah.
fascinating. So you brought up in Hungary. Was that behind the Iron Curtain?
It was up until 1989. So the first 12 years of, no, first 20 years of my life, 20 couple of years of my life, it was behind the Iron Curtain. But it wasn't as bad as it sounds. Hungary was referred to as the most joyful barracks, and we could travel within the Comecon. We could travel, and then you would get, if you had an invitation from a relative, you could travel. So when I was 10 years old, I'd come over to America for the summer to visit my aunt, and my parents sent me to a language course in England when I was 14, 15 years old, and we went on skiing trips and summer trips. So it wasn't as bad at all. I see meet a lot of people in America who traveled a lot less than I did in my childhood.
Yeah. Yes. Wonderful. What inspired you to start an investment bank in Hungary?
Uh, so after I graduated college, I got this scholarship in the Netherlands, and then from there I got an internship in London with KPMG. So I became an accountant, and I had a flatmate in London who was into investment banking. He said that he was specializing in finance stuff, and I just found it really fascinating, and I started reading up on it, and I got really into it. So after I got my chartered accountant qualification, I went to work for the EBRD, which is what kind of multilateral thing, and a bunch of investment bankers were attracted to it early on, and so I went to work there, and then from then on, I went to another bank, and then eventually I got into it. It wasn't clearly investment banking, which I had in mind. It was more about capital markets and being involved in deals. So I was doing structured finance early on. What I like about it is the excitement of the deal. So it's about helping someone sell a business, which means either realize the fruits of their labor or merge it with another business which is more successful, or acquire a business. So it's all about this growth, idea of growth, an idea of taking leaps in growth rather than just incremental. That I found it fascinating. And then I also love the negotiation part, where you have an agenda and you get in with a buyer or seller, and you want to understand what they are looking for, and how do you find the combination where they get what they want and my client gets what they want, and they get together, and it can be very acrimonious, and then they shake hands. I found that a fascinating process, and that's why what attracted to me to it. And then the actual there's also a story around the actual circumstances, how it unfolded, but yeah, that's another story. So maybe it's too much for one question.
No, it's okay. It's fine. So did you sell that business before you came to the US?
Almost. So in 2011, at summer 2011, when the European currency crisis broke out, it was a shock to my business, because we just recovered from the 2008 debacle, and we felt like no, not again. Capital markets closed down, and we had these deals, and they are falling apart again. So we got really shocked by it. And I remember my wife and I, we were on vacation at Lake Balaton, which is a big lake in Central Europe. And we basically started immediately looking for which country could we emigrate. We don't want to be in this mess again. Plus, Hungary started to go in a different direction, which is more closing down and against foreign investment. So we thought that's going to be a death now for a business. So what should we do? And so we started preparing for that. We eventually settled on the US. And then I got a call out of the blue from someone in Budapest who wanted to partner up and kind of merge our businesses. And it was a private equity fund manager. And at the time, we couldn't make a deal. It would have been perfect, but we couldn't make a deal. And so we moved over here. And within the next 12 months, basically, after 12 months, when he saw that my business was operating with my people, with me being away, it suddenly he realized that it was a much more valuable business. And then I sold it 12 months after we left. So almost before we left, but not quite.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. And what was it like transitioning from Hungary to the US?
It was the most interesting part about it was the level of trust in business that I found here was much higher than it was in Hungary. So when first time I arrived here, I remember I still had my business in Hungary, and in Hungary, my main business development was sending direct mail to people, emotional direct mail, and then they would call me. And I thought, oh, let's try that here in Virginia. We folded up 1,000 of these envelopes. It was the wrong size because it was the A4 rather than the letter size. And then as soon as I arrived, I just went to the post office. I mailed 1,000 letters, and I got 2 calls, and I got 2 clients out of it. So I thought, wow, this is great. And what really surprised me was that people, I would walk in to a meeting. I didn't know anyone here, and I didn't have any credentials. I had a LinkedIn page, so I guess they could look me up. But people would take me at face value. And I thought that was amazing. That was amazing. And it was not the suspicion in Central Eastern Europe. Everyone is keeping a distance. And the default position is that you're not an honest person, and you have to prove that you are who you are. And here it was the opposite. They took me at face value, and if things didn't stack up, or if something was inconsistent, or there was a red flag, then they would say, okay, then maybe this guy is not who he says he is. But that was very liberating, and I felt it was a very much a booster for business. The other thing I noticed was that a meeting that took 1 hour in Budapest, we would go down to Bucharest, it would take 2 hours at the same meeting. If we went into Transylvania, we did some business in the Hungarian speaking part of Romania, Transylvania, it would take 3 hours. If I came to Richmond, the same meeting would be 30 minutes, and in New York, it was 15 minutes. So that was just the speed
Right.
of business was completely different, and it was refreshing. It was a little bit discombobulating. First, you got used to it, and it was very dynamic and refreshing.
Yeah, and look, I love America. I have a lot of friends there, and I like it's a little bit culturally different from the UK. The UK, it is almost a little bit slower in the decision making and the way that people go, and the element of introducing people is a lot stronger. Where I find that people in America are open to where there's a win situation, and they are very much happier to take a cold call and have be outreached by a salesperson. So I can understand the difference of culture, where that was, and so I find that absolutely fascinating. Next question I wanted to ask you was, why did you decide to go into coaching and consulting?
Yeah, so we arrived over here, and I started doing investment banking, and I got a couple of clients, and then I brought one of my people. So one of the critical thing for me when selling my company was that I could keep my best person and working for me. So I wanted to build a business here. But after about 12 months, what I realized was that it was an uphill struggle because really we didn't have a network here. And the initial direct mail thing did work, but it wasn't a sustainable thing. And doing marketing here was completely different. I had a newsletter in Budapest, which in Hungary, which worked really well in thought leadership. It didn't work at all here. It was a print newsletter. So I couldn't figure out the sustainable way of growing that business. When we got the green card about a year after we moved here, my wife got really nervous about me being an entrepreneur and being in such a risky business. So I basically closed that business down, and then I looked around and said I felt like I needed someone to teach me how to really market the business in the US. And then I was looking for a franchise opportunity, and Vistage, which is a business coaching organization, reached out to me, and I thought maybe that's a good thing. I put together a peer group here in Richmond of CEOs, and I get to learn how business works here. I build some relationships.
Mm.
I can maybe build some business opportunities. So that's why I got into coaching. And it was more about facilitating the peer group, a mastermind group. I had a mastermind group in Budapest earlier, so I was familiar with the concept. And then I launched a second group a year later, a second Vistage group, and I wanted to grow that business. But then it turned out that Richmond was too small for multiple groups, and there was a low price point competitor here in town. So then I had to move on to other types of coaching, and I did some executive coaching. Then I realized it's too draining to do a bunch of coaching conversations with people, and it was very hard work. And then I discovered leadership team coaching through EOS, and we use EOS in my business, and then it was a natural thing to try to help other companies with EOS, and then I got into that, and then I saw that were some gaps in EOS that didn't make sense to me, and then I was thinking about how to evolve things, and then I came up with this idea which is Strategy OS, which is what's the sequel of EOS. If people implement EOS and they got the execution down, what's the next step? How can they keep using a coach to grow their business? So again, it's a long story, and then EOS turned into a franchise, and I left, and I ended up building the execution piece as well.
So let's just keep on Vistage just for a minute, because a couple of my friends are in Vistage, and it's a very reputable mastermind sort of group that you work in, working with people to be able to grow their businesses. What did you learn from being part of Vistage that's helped you as a facilitator at Vistage, that's helped you develop other programs and other ways of being able to help entrepreneurs and business owners?
Yeah, I learned a lot of things, but perhaps the biggest one was active listening. And in Vistage, you had the saying that don't just do something, stand there, which I found was a fascinating way to express this idea that it's very easy to react and to share and to give advice, but actually to be present for people and to really hear them and listen to them and process it and let them talk it out is a very powerful skill. And I realized that there are a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, the way they think is through talking. And Winston Churchill was a
Mm,
famous example of it. And also FDR, the same thing. He had to have
mm.
people around, a group of people around him. FDR had these 5 o'clock cocktails hour, and Churchill had these late night sessions in Chartwell, where he had a
Yeah.
bunch of people. And it was not that he needed the advice of those people as much as he needed the audience so that he could actually speak it out and work it out, the ideas. And I found that a lot of entrepreneurs are like that. They don't have anyone to talk to who can listen to them, who can understand them, and just by talking things out was very valuable to them.
So entrepreneurship can be quite lonely, can't it? Because if you're the sole owner of a business and you're trying to grow that business, there is an element, and I totally understand what you're saying about being able to speak it out. It can be a lonely way of life. How do you, with your programs and supporting people, how do you build that support network for entrepreneurs?
It's not my focus right now to be at Vistage. Obviously, that was the focus, that we got people together once a month for a full day, and the other saying that we had in Vistage, that people join the group because of you, because of the coach, but they stay in the group because of the group. So it was really the
Mm,
initial thing was, okay, there's someone I can talk to, but then it was, okay,
mm.
there's a group of people that I can relate to, and then I don't feel so lonely, and I see their struggles, and it wasn't so much even the business necessarily in every case what they learned from the speakers, but really this relatedness. Now I could help them that way to connect with them. These days I don't think I can necessarily do it as a leadership team coach for them. I think they still need their peer group. And that's why I think that leadership team coaching and peer groups are so synergistic, because in the leadership team coaching, I work with the leadership team and I help the owner transfer the burden of running the company from themselves to the team. It's empowering the team and help them execute really well. But the owner will still be a lonely guy and they still need to connect to their peers in a peer group.
Mm.
So they still need both. And I just now work in the other arena, which is the leadership team coaching, but it's not going to replace their peer group.
Yeah, sure. So is that Strategy OS, is it?
Yeah, so I have Summit OS and Strategy OS. So Summit OS is the execution. So it's helping a business empower their team, execute like hell. And then Strategy OS is digging the moat around the business. When it's a well executing business, how do we make it a high margin business with unique activities that is very hard to copy for a competitor and which is highly differentiated and is profitable in a sustainable way?
So you talk about differentiation in business. You just mentioned it there, and you in the research that I did, you talk about that, and you talk about how creating a moat for your business. How do you help your clients in that way?
So that's a Strategy OS. So what strategy, if you're familiar with the OS or scaling up or other operating systems, Summit OS is my version of it. It helps you put all the major execution pieces in place. So in Summit OS, we talked about the 5 business growth principles: people, purpose, performance, playbooks, and profit. So this is the basics: the great execution, strategic planning, playbooks so that you systemize the business. It's having a cohesive culture. So these are the basics. And when you have got the basics down, then you want to build this differentiated business. And Strategy OS helps you step by step build this differentiation. It's discovering your uniqueness. It's discovering the right positioning, what the market forces that you are this in. It's your environment and how do you position yourself to be the most profitable in this environment. It's about discovering your constraint and how you can overcome. It's the coping mechanisms that I told you. My coping mechanism helped me become a systems coach. Everyone has coping mechanisms. And what I have found was that the most successful companies had the biggest struggles for which they developed a coping mechanism, which then became a competitive differentiator. So that's what digging a moat around the business is: finding those constraints, overcoming them, developing unique activities, and then systemizing that in the business, and then creating this one of a kind business that no one can replicate it, because no one have gone through those struggles exactly that you have gone through, and they have not
Mm.
built those coping mechanisms that you have, and that makes you unique.
Can you give an example of a client that you've worked with that you've helped be able to grow and scale their business for them?
Yeah, I can give several examples. So one is a real estate syndication business here in Northern Virginia, and we started working 3.5 years ago, and they didn't have a structure, they didn't have processes, they didn't have execution system. They were just basically 3 people in a room and trying to figure out what to do. And fast forward today, they have 20 people. They 4x the revenue, they 3x the profit. They have a team and they are growing dynamically. Another example, a software company, they 4xed in 4 years by figuring out how to develop an MRR model, and then how to sell it, and how to build a team, and how to get rid of activities that were outside the core business, and the personal relationships even. I've worked with plastic surgery the last 15 months, and they between 2 and 3x their business during that time. It went from just a mom and pop type business into now multiple doctors and multiple operating rooms, and social media doubled. Pricing went up dramatically. And there are many other examples. Basically, most companies are not firing on all cylinders. They don't know all the
Mm.
basics, because why should they know? They are really good at their own discipline, their own subject matter that they are an expert in. It's
Mm.
all the Michael Gerber technicians start companies, not
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, and they
Yeah.
need that information. And where do they get it? There's so many books out there, and there are so many shiny objects, and people are bombarding them. So my goal was to synthesize those books down into a simple framework that is fully coherent, it's scalable, and it's customizable. So we have developed about 80 proprietary tools that all of them talk to each other. It's like a Lego kit, and you can build your business. And depending on where you are, you use these bricks, and if you're this way, you use the other bricks, and you just build. You put in the missing bricks, and you build your business like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned Michael Gerber with the E-Myth. Is there another couple of books that you would recommend as really good things for business owners to grow their business with?
Yeah, absolutely. Many books out there. So the classic ones, Michael Gerber, E-Myth, and then in my genre, in the business systems genre, then Jack Stack, The Great Game of Business, and then Vern Harnish, Rockefeller Habits, Scaling Up, Patrick Lencioni's books, who talks about team dynamics, five dysfunctions, and the advantage come to mind. And then you have the OKR books about OKRs, and then Jim Collins. Obviously, the Jim Collins books are very valuable, and then Peter Drucker, going back, and Andy Grove, fellow compatriot Hungarian who ran Intel. He wrote a couple of really good books. So there are a bunch of and there are hundreds of others. So
Yeah, no,
yeah,
absolutely. There is a
yeah,
long
there's a
list
long
there.
list,
People can get
and
help.
I have a picture of all the books that went into the Summit OS system. So we have about 48 different books that contributed to it, and it's a funnel. How do we
Right.
synthesize these ideas down into coherent concepts that work well together? Because most of the time, you read these books, they overlap,
Mm,
and then it can
mm,
become
mm.
very confusing because you read an idea here, and then they talk about the same idea there, but they use different terminology. And then how do you reconcile it? You don't have the full picture in your mind where everything belongs, and that's what a system like Summitos helps you. It organizes it for you.
So what's interesting about what you've said is that whole idea of creating systems and processes. And that's something we come back to a lot on this show is when you're in growth phase, you need to where you start at the startup phase, you have a group of people, like-minded people, all pulling together in the same direction and they're trying to make a business grow. But I'm assuming what you've said, when people get to you and look for help from you, it's when they're looking to build systems, specializations, areas of the business that they can then propel, put gasoline, put fuel on the fire to be able to grow it faster. For you, what is the most important aspect of creating systems and processes for business owners?
I think it's basically a discipline. So it's a
Interesting.
discipline to actually do it. It's not rocket science at all. It is recognizing the importance of it, really getting it. Even some business coaches don't recognize how important those are, even those that teach them, because they don't viscerally get that it's important. They understand it logically, but their mind doesn't work that way. So I know some business coaches who are really good salespeople, and for them, the way they do business and the way they teach their clients is they just sell them on ideas, but they don't help them necessarily execute them because it's not how they operate, and therefore they can't teach other people. So the most important thing is to recognize it's a discipline, and they have to ingrain it in the business, and they have to optimize it over time. And if you build the machine that will do it, then you will have it in your business. It's like another important a book, Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Mm,
So he
mm,
talks about this
mm.
idea that you can stack your habit stacking. The way I think about being a business is it's a bunch of habits stacked on each other. And
Right.
you have to be very meticulous about not jumping from one to another before you actually ingrained it. Don't try to do more than what you can. Don't bite more than you can chew, and that works for business as well. So first you have to have the basics, and then you can put one by one those little new habits and make sure that you fully ingrain them and you internalize them, and then they become second nature, and then you can have another one, and ultimately you'll have a great business which is fully systemized, and it's like a great character of an individual who's got great habits, and they sleep 8 hours and they do their exercises and they do their reading and they do their social thing and they learn new things and they do get their work done on time. And it's the same thing for a business than it is for a human.
So, so after speaking to you for a little while, it feels to me that you're a very thoughtful person. You said that you brought 48 books, roughly 48 books into your strategy OS and Summit OS to be able to build your coaching practice. How do you simplify what you're teaching to be able to have its greatest impact?
That's a great question. And I can't give you a documented process for simplifying. It's one of those things that it happens in the mind. It's synthesis. So, how do you synthesize things? It's trying to understand the basic elements of something. And actually, the way I came up with the Summit OS 15 business growth practices. This is a little wheel that kind of shows you. So there are 5 principles that I mentioned: the people, purpose, performance, playbooks, and profit. And below which there are 3 concepts each. And I call these the 15 business growth principles. And I didn't come up actually with the 5 principles. So when I left the US, I joined an organization called Pinnacle. And they had the founder of Pinnacle, Greg Cleary. He came up with the 5 principles. But there was no I didn't see any clear explanation of why these 5 principles and what's behind it and what makes them work. I was struggling teaching it, and then I said, okay, so let me clarify this. So okay, these are 5 principles. That's great. It actually comes from Shigao Shingo. It's a Japanese idea, just rephrased for business. So what are behind each of these? And I said, okay, let's find 3 concepts that I can use to explain each or to expand on each. And it has to be a single word. So I cannot use any adjectives like that. It's just a single word. So I came up with the 15 words. And then I started developing, okay, so what does it take to maximize these 15 ideas, which I eventually now call the 15 business growth practices. And I turned it into a book, which became the Pinnacle book. So I was part of this organization, Pinnacle, and I wrote the draft of this book. And I went to Greg Cleary, who was the founder, and said, hey, I've written a book about your organization, and I think we should teach this. These are 15 business growth practices. And he says, oh, great. Okay. And I says, okay, you can be my co-author. And then we published it. It became very successful, but he never adopted these 15 business growth practices. He kept teaching the way he saw things. And that's why I left Pinnacle Business Guys and created Summit OS so that I can actually teach those 15 business growth practices. So how do I simplify things? I try to understand the very basic of it, to take the hype out, to not use any adjectives, just use the essence of things and look for that. That's how I do it. Actually, it is a principle in Summit OS that if we cannot teach a concept in less than 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, it's much too complicated. It's not going to work. So it's a facilitation based approach. So let's say we have an 8-hour session, and in the 8-hour sessions, maybe we have 8 segments. Then I will spend 3 to 5 minutes, or my coaches, because I have other coaches in the system, 3 to 5 minutes. We explain it, the thing, and then we spend the next 50 minutes or 45 minutes with the team um, working on how are we going to use this? How does it apply to our business? What does it mean to us? how can we grow the business using these ideas? And that's where the Vistage thing comes in, the facilitation, working with a team
Mm,
to leverage ideas
mm.
comes in. I probably didn't simplify this enough.
No, it's great. It's great. No, thank you very much. How so? Some of my audience might be coaches, and they might be in various levels of experience or expertise. How do you specifically go out and find your clients? What's your marketing and sales processes for new clients?
Yeah, I have a blog, a weekly blog that I write. So some people respond to it. I also have 6 books out on Amazon that we promote. So we get people read, and then there are downloadable tools that people can access from the book. We have about 20 downloadable tools available for free on my website. I've got a book on my website which is downloadable free. I also do public speaking. So it's not a silver bullet. I have different things that I do. And
Yeah.
basically, I'm an old guy, but I try to learn how business is done in a way where you attract people to the content that you have and then find you. And then we also
Right. So content
content
marketing.
marketing, and then we also sponsor conferences. So we go and with a booth in conferences and spread the gospel, tell people about what we do and how we help
Mm.
businesses grow and how we are unique. And then we get people who want that.
Amazing. What's your risk appetite? What would you say your risk appetite is?
It depends who you ask. If you ask me, I think I'm fairly conservative, but if you ask my wife, I'm reckless.
So give me both viewpoints. Why do you think you're
Right.
quite conservative, and why does your wife think you're quite
Oh,
reckless?
I hope my wife's not going to listen to this, but which is a sure bet. So my wife would much rather me have a 9 to 5 job and not.
Mine too. Don't worry. We're in the same
Yeah.
boat here. Don't worry. Yeah.
So not try to come up with new ideas all the time and just execute other people's ideas, I guess. And why I think I'm conservative is because I think I have grown quite good of striking the balance between avoiding shiny objects as much as I can, while also being open to new ideas. So not being completely like a Teflon person. And
Mhm.
I try to manage my costs, keep it fairly low. I don't always succeed. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm a little bit more risk seeking than I should be. But on the other hand, I don't see that just by doing your so if you're not working on expansion, then you don't have a future. So I have to invest
Mhm.
some of my time and energy and money into new things so that I can evolve. And there
Yes.
and there's a tipping point where things break through. And I don't know. It's a big subject. I can't answer it
Yes.
in three
Okay.
minutes.
No, that's all right. What do you still want to achieve?
Coach in Toronto called Dan Sullivan, and he's very famous. He found a strategy coach, and he talks about this concept of make your future always bigger than your past. So I believe my future is bigger than my past. So I'm really passionate about this idea of eradicating business COVID. So business COVID, this is
Okay.
a pandemic that's killing about 185,000 businesses each year. And I'm talking about
Mm.
businesses between 10 and 250 people in the US. There are 1.7 million of such businesses. So almost 10%, over 10% of them die. And because they run out of cash, or they get disrupted, or they get commoditized, or they are not able to attract the right people or keep them, or they're not able to transition the business. So that's business COVID. I call this business COVID. And Summit OS was developed to eradicate business COVID, one company at a time. So my why is to eradicate business COVID, and I cannot do it my own. So that's why I have other coaches, and that's why I write my books, because I want to spread the idea of eradicating business COVID with Summit OS tools. And I did the math. So in the US, if we eradicated business COVID, which we would create 2 million jobs, new jobs each year, and we would increase the GDP growth by 4% a year just by doing that. So I think it's a big goal, and I'm not going to achieve it too early, that's for sure.
And lastly, before we go into the quickfire questions, I just wanted to talk to you about delegation because it's a really important point for me. A lot of businesses that earlier stage that are going into the growth stage can struggle with that art of delegation and being able to empower their team to be able to take the business forward and move that forward. How do you explain it? How do you make people understand that if they're the bottleneck of a company, they're not going to be able to grow perhaps to where they're aspiring their business to be?
Yeah, the way I explain it is that you have a business and you want to 3x this business. So our goal is always 3x the business in 3 years. So how do
Okay.
you 3x this business? The only way to do it is to triple the impact of the leadership team. And how do you do that? You cannot do it without growing your leadership team, which means get them to do higher value activities and delegate all the lower value to make time for the higher value activities. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
So this is how I
Yeah.
explain it. And then what you want to do, the way you can actually achieve this is you have to turn your function owners. First, you define the functions that your business is going to grow your business. It could be sales, marketing, operations, finance, engineering, whatever it is. And then empower people. So let them run their functions like mini CEOs. I call them mini CEOs,
Mm,
which
mm.
means that they are the CEO of that function and they have to be strategic about growing that function. So they are not just executing tasks. They're thinking, okay, I am CEO of the marketing function. How can I make marketing more impactful? What are the higher level
Mm,
activities that we can do in marketing? And
mm.
think in an expensive way, and then delegate everything else to the next level, to the mini CEOs of those sub functions, whether it's content
Yeah.
creation or social media management, and make everyone more strategic. And that's how I think of delegation.
Amazing. Thank you for explaining that. Look, we're coming to the end of the interview. I ask the same 6 questions to all of my guests. They quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. First question is, what's the best decision that you've made?
To marry my wife. But okay, more business related.
Let's answer that. Let's
Okay.
delve a little bit into that. So what does she bring to your relationship and your outlook on life, which has been helpful and advantageous for you as a person, personally and professionally?
She's a fellow chartered accountant, so she understands business the same way, or at least the basics. And she is she's a big thinker, and she pushes me, but she also keeps me grounded. It's a good. She's also more social than I am, so she forces me to also not be too much of a recluse. And I could go on.
Yeah, my wife grounds me. Like that's her biggest, or she has many great things about her, but one of the things like I'm looking for the next project, next business, next growth opportunity, and she's always that person who's like just keeps me grounded and saying like whether it's time or money or effort to be able to do that. Thank you for sharing that. What's the best piece of advice someone's given you?
Um, it was not a person that I personally known, or I saw them speak once, and I'm trying to remember his name. But it's all about building character. That's the most important. That you have a character, and you become the person that you want yourself to be. It's hard to explain, but the way he said it, he said that it's not about the point of becoming a millionaire that was written 50 years ago. I guess it's no longer a target. Is to It's not why you become that. It's not about making so much money, but it's about becoming the person who is worth to be a millionaire, something like that. So
Mm,
it's
mm,
about
mm.
character. It's about becoming the person that you wish to be remembered as.
Yeah, amazing. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career?
Probably my dad, by being who he is and seeing him how he succeeded as an athlete and as a professional, and seeing his struggles and how he overcame them, and how he in some cases didn't overcome them and he had to learn to live with them. And that was very instructive, very inspiring, and very instructive for me.
Amazing. Tell me about a regret that you have.
I'm not great on regrets, to be honest, but one thing I regret is allowing myself to be brainwashed in a certain situation. So I talked about EOS, and I was doing EOS implementation without joining the EOS community, so to say, and it worked quite well. I developed the talk, and I got clients, and I've worked with them. I made a lot of mistakes, but I was growing. And then I joined the community, and I started to be exposed to their ways of doing things, and I started to believe it, and then it stopped working for me. And I regret having allowed that to happen. And I know that this is
Why did it stop working for you?
because I stopped doing the things that worked, and I started doing the things that they said I should be doing to make it work, and
Ah,
they
right.
just
Okay.
didn't work because my personality was different from Gino Wickman's or whoever, and it's just a big regret that don't let people tell you how to do things, work it out your way, and that's gonna work better for you.
Yeah, amazing. I've put in a new question. I've actually dropped one out and I put in a new question. Tell me something that most people don't know about you.
Don't know about me and it's important, or don't know about it and it's irrelevant. So when I was young, I was a fencer and a competitive fencer. In Hungary, fencing is kind of a big sport, and yeah, and I really loved it, and I studied it the same way as I study business. I read a bunch of books about it and tried to figure out the mechanics and why those things work and how I could build it. And I can't say it worked as well as the business stuff, but that's most people don't know that.
Just as a side note, your passion for jazz music, how do you think that's helped you in business and as a coach?
I don't know if it did, but what I like about jazz music is that it's very creative and it can um, provide surprises, very curious surprises. And I guess it did help me in business because in business, it's also about improvisation. Sometimes you have to, in real time, you have to respond to things, and you develop this intuition. If you watch, for example, if you watch jazz musicians, that they are in tune with each other and they respond to each other and they complement
Mm,
each other and then they get to swing together. And that's what you need to
mm.
do on a leadership team. You have to listen and respond and get in tune and then start to swing together. And that's when the leadership team hit their stride, when they become like a jazz band that is really.
Yeah, it's like the improvisation side, I think is very important in jazz. I'm not a big jazz fan, but I know people that are, and they say that they can riff off on a certain way and then the band reacts and responds to it. I actually think it's a really good metaphor for there is structure, but there's loose structure
Mhm.
that you can then evolve and change while you're playing. I think it's a really good metaphor for business. So that's why I just brought it up. So thank you for
Yeah, never
sharing.
thought of that. I agree.
What does legacy mean to you?
You ask big questions, Mark.
These 6 questions are very thought-provoking, is how it's been described.
No,
So, yeah.
I don't need a bigger legacy than eradicating business COVID. It's probably I'm not going to live to see it, but maybe that could be if other people take on and continue where I leave off and build on it and push the concepts, we could get to this point. So it could become
Mm,
a legacy maybe 100 years from now. Um,
yeah.
I don't really think of these terms. Maybe I still feel young to think about my legacy, but that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's why the question is, what does it mean to you? Because it can mean some people legacy of their children, some people legacy of their current business. Sometimes it's the legacy of an idea, like you're explaining that if we can eradicate business COVID, I think is an amazing aspiration for a legacy. Just keep going, keep doing it, and hopefully we'll all get there. lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you, if they want to find more about your business?
So the best place to find me is stevepreda.com. And Preda is spelled with an E, not the fashion brand, Preda with an E. And and then they can find everything. They can find my systems, they can find blogs, they can find podcasts, they can find downloadable tools, even a book. My latest book is downloadable for free there. So that's the best place to go.
Brilliant. Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much for your time today. It's an absolute pleasure exploring business coaching with you, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mark. You ask great questions. You're a great host. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Business Growth Talks. This podcast is released every Monday, so don't miss an episode by subscribing to all podcast platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Have a great day.